Chapter 254, Annihilation. Rumble rumble. Sand waves swept forth before this sector of the woodlands nearly crumbled in an instant. As dirt filled the horizons, it seemed just like a raging sandstorm. Bang! Amidst that sandstorm, a deep echo, that caused one's scalp to turn numb, swiftly followed. Soon after, a hideous figure flew out from within, before he directly ripped a near 100-meter-long ditch on the ground. While the sandstorm raged on, Lin Dong's figure was still maintaining the same pose after he executed his punch. Meanwhile, drops of fresh blood continuously dripped off his fist before it dyed the ground below blood red. Squeak! Lin Dong kept this pose for a while, before he finally somewhat stiffly lifted his head and stared coldly at Hua Zong, who had been blown away by his punch. At the same time, his heart began to pound violently. This was the first time he had used that so-called Yuan essence energy, and its terrifying destructive potential has filled his heart with awe. Its destructive power was so strong that even a high-ranked soul treasure could not defend against it. Squeak! Just as Lin Dong was in awe over the might of his Yuan essence energy, Hua Zong, whose body had crumpled at a distance away, began to vomit out mouthfuls of fresh blood. Promptly, his eyes were filled with shock as he turned to look at his mysterious earth armor, only to see that right now, there was actually a solid punch mark left behind, while cracks began to slowly emerge from that mark. Even though his mysterious earth armor possessed such strong defensive abilities, it was still nearly destroyed by one punch from Lin Dong. Though his mysterious earth armor was not completely shattered, a majority of the force behind Lin Dong's punch still seeped in through the cracks and left Hua Zong severely injured. How is this possible? As he felt that intense pain originating from his chest area, Hua Zong involuntarily shouted out hideously. Even those elite practitioners from Great Devil Sect, who possessed extremely tough bodies, were unable to destroy a high-grade soul treasure with one punch alone. Hence, how could a mere Lin Dong accomplish it? However, regardless of how Hua Zong complained, he could not alter the facts. Therefore, after he angrily grumbled, he quickly regained some of his senses. Then, as he stared at Lin Dong's icy cold expression, his eyes glimmered before he slapped against the ground and swiftly retreated away using his mental energy. Right now, since he had suffered such a severe injury and his mysterious earth armor had been reduced to such a sorry state, if Lin Dong delivered a similar punch from before, this would probably be his final resting spot. Bastard, shit has gotten real this time. I never expected this kid to be so strong. As he bitterly endured his injuries, Hua Zong's figure swiftly retreated while he cursed angrily inside his heart. He had never expected that Lin Dong was actually this powerful. Even though he was only at initial form creation stage, he was nearly able to destroy the mysterious earth armor, which had thwarted most advanced form creation stage practitioners. At this juncture, the only thing he could do was to retreat first. After all, there were several elite practitioners in Ghastly Puppet Cult. In fact, in the worst-case scenario, he could ask his dad for help. Since he was at advanced Qi creation stage, it would be a simple matter for him to kill Lin Dong. With this thought in mind, Hua Zong did not dare to linger any further. In fact, he did not even bother recalling his symbol puppet before he directly ran off. Since you decided to come, then don't leave now. However, even though he wanted to leave, Lin Dong would not let him off so easily. Lin Dong was very clear of his personality and he knew that if he did not finish him off now, then he would definitely become a major threat in the future. Therefore, he could let him off if nothing happened between them. However, once he made his move, then he must be completely ruthless. Right now, as he stared at Hua Zong, who was frantically running away, Lin Dong coldly snorted. Then, he stomped his foot against the ground before he transformed into a blurry figure and dashed forth. In a blink of an eye, he had caught up to that heavily wounded Hua Zong, whose speed had been severely reduced due to his injuries. Lin Dong, my father is an elder of Ghastly Puppet Cult. If you dare to harm me, there will be nowhere to hide in this entire great desolate province. When he heard a formidable breaking wind sound coming from behind, Huazong's facial expression changed drastically as he shouted. Fool! As he faced Huazong's shout, Lin Dong chuckled as he shook his head. Tightly clenching his fist, a golden glow emerged before he directly punched at Huazong's head. Right now, Huazong, who had lost the protection of his mysterious earth armor, was unable to withstand a single blow from him. With regards to his current situation, that Huazong was evidently aware of it. Instantly, his eyes turned blood red, before several grayish mental energy blade manically hacked at Lin Dong. Bang! As he faced Huazong's frantic counterattack, the bronze-green glint on Lin Dong's skin turned increasingly dark. As he punched forth, golden yuan power gushed out and forcibly blew apart those mental energy blades. The strength behind his punch caused the surrounding air to explode, just like a highly pressured air cannon. Hence, before his fist arrived, that force wind had already viciously rained down on Huazong's body. Squeak! When that formidable force wind gushed over, Huazong vomited another mouthful of fresh blood. Promptly, a maniacal glint flashed across his eyes, as he understood that Lin Dong was truly intent on killing him. It's not going to be so easy to kill me! Huazong roared like a wild beast. Then, waves of powerful mental energy gushed out before it directly transformed into a several meters tall greyish skull. Major Ghoul Techniques, Mental Corroding Skull. A formidable shout echoed out from Huazong's throat. Then, two balls of mental energy fire suddenly appeared in the hollow eyes of that greyish skull, that was forged from mental energy. Swoosh! When that mental energy fire appeared in the eyes of the greyish skull, a peculiar swooshing noise instantly sounded out from its mouth. Then, that skull opened its mouth, before a greyish swirl emerged from within, while a powerful suction force emerged. That suction force did not have much impact on physical objects. However, instantly, Lin Dong could feel that all the mental energy was being drained from his Nuan Palace and sucked into that skull. Donate to me all of your mental energy. Huazong's face was hideous as he desperately spat out a mouthful of essence blood. When that skull was covered with his blood, its suction force violently increased. These ghastly puppet cult members are truly peculiar. Lin Dong was taken aback by Huazong's endless artifices. Promptly, a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Then, with a flick of his mind, the 4 destiny soul symbols in his Nuan Palace began to contort, before they instantly turned into 4 destiny swirls. How about you donate to me instead? Lin Dong's large hands suddenly stretched out, before it grabbed onto that greyish skull. Then, a terrifying suction force violently emerged. Promptly, awe filled that Huazong's face. That was because he realized that the mental energy inside that greyish skull was being rapidly sucked away by Lin Dong. You can actually directly consume mental energy. Huazong was shocked as he shouted out. Though their ghastly puppet cult were able to perform the same peculiar feat, they could only accomplish it via various secretive ways. However, none of them were able to directly suck out one's mental energy like Lin Dong. Furthermore, what shocked him the most was that after consuming others' mental energy, Lin Dong did not suffer any backlash. Rather, the glow in his eyes grew increasingly resplendent. Break! That greyish skull swiftly dimmed under Lin Dong's maniacal suction force, before it was directly crushed by him. Promptly, his icy cold eyes turned to look at Huazong. You devil! Right now, Huazong's face was completely filled with terror. The various abilities that Lin Dong possessed were completely out of this world. Lin Dong's face was stone cold. After he swallowed that greyish skull forged from mental energy, he could clearly feel that the mental energy inside his Nuan Palace had grown much stronger. Though it was slightly forceful and demonic to snatch away others' mental energy, it was indeed a very effective move. Since you have decided to hunt after me, you should be prepared for this outcome. Lin Dong gently smiled at Huazong. Then, his palm suddenly landed on the latter's head before a suction force violently emerged and directly swallowed all of the latter's mental energy inside his Nuan Palace. Bastard, the ghastly puppet cult will hunt you down. Your outcome will be 100 times worse than mine. Just wait and see. My father will torture you till you beg for your own death. As he felt his mental energy swiftly dissipating, Huazong began to turn desperate, as he stared venomously at Lin Dong and cursed viciously. I will bear my own consequences. Lin Dong's eyes were stone cold before he violently pressed against Huazong's head. A stealthy force violently gushed out before it directly shattered the latter's skull, and brought an end to this intense battle. Fresh blood gushed out from his head. Huazong's face was frozen between hatred and fear while he slowly crumbled onto the ground. A major player in Great Puppet City had been completely annihilated right here. As Huazong's aura dissipated, Lin Dong plopped down on the ground, before he stared at a distance away. At that area, Huazong's symbol puppet had turned stiff as well after Huazong's demise. Huff! Lin Dong lowered his head as he violently panted. This intense battle had taken quite a toll on him as that fellow simply had too many treasures with him. In the end, if he had not utilized Yuan Essence energy to destroy his mysterious earth armor, Lin Dong may not have been able to do much damage to him. Since you have killed this fellow, you should be in for quite a lot of trouble. Little Martin suddenly appeared at this juncture, before it spoke. Even if I let him off, I would still be in trouble. Lin Dong shook his head. This Huazong was a vengeful individual. Hence, if he let him off, he would definitely utilize his ghastly puppet cult's influence and hunt after him. Therefore, it would be best for him to finish him off now. However, this time, the rewards are quite substantial. Lin Dong lifted his head as he stared at that motionless symbol puppet. Then, he forcefully ripped the mysterious earth armor off Huazong's body. Even though it was slightly damaged, once he fixed it, this high-grade soul treasure would be as good as new. After he tore off that mysterious earth armor, a black Qian bag that was hidden within landed into Lin Dong's arms. As he stared at this gloomy-looking Qian bag, a slightly smile emerged on Lin Dong's face. It seems like this Huazong has delivered several sorely needed treasures to Lin Dong. Chapter 255, A Bountiful Harvest. As looked at that Qian bag in his hands, a wide smile surfaced on Lin Dong's lips. From the fact that Huazong seemed to possess countless number of treasures, he already knew that this Huazong was definitely a juicy cash cow. In fact, his possession far exceeds those of Wang Yan. Naturally, this did not indicate that ghastly puppet cult was stronger than Wang clan, but rather, it was because Huazong held a certain status in ghastly puppet cult. Else, he would not have been able to afford such luxuries. Let me find out just how loaded you are. Lin Dong cheekily smiled, before his mental energy gushed into the Qian bag. Then, his face began to gradually turn stiff before he deeply exhaled, while a tinge of shock and delight filled the far corners of his eyes. 250,000 pure yuan pills. Lin Dong involuntarily licked his lips before he stared in bewilderment at Huazong's corpse. Evidently, he had never expected that this fellow had actually brought along so many pure yuan pills. In the past, when Lin Dong extorted the Di and Lu families, he only obtained 200,000 pure yuan pills. Furthermore, they had to pool their resources together in order to pay him. However, right now, the pure yuan pills that he obtained from Huazong alone had exceeded that figure. Therefore, this goes to show just how wealthy Huazong was. Of course, Lin Dong did not know about ghastly puppet cult's extensive business interests in Great Puppet City. Furthermore, as the local custodian, Huazong was considered as an elite member. Together with his father's backing, it was not impossible to believe that he would possess so many pure yuan pills. After all, Huazong's ability far exceeds those of the Lu and Di families. With regards to how Huazong sourced his wealth, Lin Dong did not pay much heed to it. After all of his items now belonged to him. Immediately, he unceremoniously took all of that 250,000 pure yuan pills, and kept it inside his own Qian bag. As he felt his Qian bag instantly swell up, Lin Dong felt relieved as he heaved a deep sigh of relief. Previously, he had been truly broke and in fact, he even lacked the pills needed to activate his symbol puppet. Therefore, these 250 pure yuan pills delivered by Huazong was truly timely. Of course, he did not voluntarily deliver them. After he kept those pure Yuan pills, Lin Dong continued to fumble around. The results caused him to be extremely satisfied. That was because he had found a few secret spirits skills manuals. With regards to secret spirits skills, Lin Dong had only a few. Therefore, he possessed limited mental energy attacks, and he was definitely lacking in comparison to Hua Zong. Hence, once he discovered these secret spirit skills manuals, he unceremoniously kept them with a wide grin. Major Ghoul Techniques. Furthermore, among the secret spirit skills manuals, the one that drew Lin Dong's attention was undoubtedly a secret spirit skills manual made from jade. There were 4 large and ghastly words plastered on that manual, which signaled that this item was probably extraordinary. A trace of Lin Dong's mental energy penetrated inside. Half a moment later, a tinge of shock flashed across Lin Dong's twinkly eyes. That was because this so-called Major Ghoul Techniques actually possessed 2 extremely formidable secret spirit skills. Based on Lin Dong's estimates, they should have been of Qi grade. Among these 2 secret spirit skills, one of them was Mental Corroding Skull that Hua Zong had executed previously. This skill was able to absorb others' mental energy, and after a complicated refining process, one was able to use it to strengthen one's mental energy. All in all, it was somewhat similar to Lin Dong's Destiny Swirls. Nonetheless, the efficiency and ferocity of this technique was totally incomparable to Lin Dong's. It's no wonder that fellow was able to advance to Soul Symbol Master. He must have relied on this deviant method. As he digested this fact, Lin Dong finally came to this realization. Based on the usual cultivation rate, it was pretty remarkable that Hua Zong was able to reach Soul Symbol Master at such a young age. However, in light of this fact now seemed somewhat plausible. With regards to the other secret spirit skill, it seemed even more powerful, and it was named Ghastly Devil Howl. This was a secret spirit skills that was able to transform one's mental energy into a unique sound wave. Though it was extremely powerful, it was quite difficult to execute it well. In fact, even a lower-ranked symbol master like Hua Zong failed to do so. Else, Lin Dong would have an even harder time for today's fight. Even though it is slightly deviant, it would be a good insurance policy. Lin Dong gently smiled before he kept that Major Ghoul Techniques into his bag. Even though the methods utilized by Ghastly Puppet Cult were not considered righteous, he did not look down on them. After all, the only law within this natural world was that the victor would reign supreme. In fact, most people are only concerned with the final outcome, and they pay little attention to the means used to accomplish it. In fact, on the subject of deviant methods, Lin Dong figured that his Destiny Swirls were probably even more deviant and domineering compared to the Ghastly Puppet Cult. Usually, he would choose not to activate them. However, if he met a ruthless and cruel person like Hua Zong, he would not hesitate to use them. After all, in this world, strength reigns supreme. The laws of the natural world similarly applies to human society as well, especially in a place like Great Desolate Province. After he kept these secret spirit skills manuals, Lin Dong fumbled around for a while. From Hua Zong's Qian bag, he had found several soul treasures. However, most of them were low-ranked, and hence they held little appeal to him. Amongst them, the only one that Lin Dong fancied was the dark red dagger without a handle. This was a mid-ranked soul treasure, and it was extremely sharp and powerful. When used for a sneak attack, it was deadly and silent. Therefore, it could prove to be quite useful in a fight. Lin Dong spent several minutes before he finally tabulated the total reward that he obtained this time. His total reward was truly bountiful. Disregarding the 200,000 pure Yuan pills and Major Ghoul Techniques, which definitely pleased Lin Dong, just that damaged mysterious earth armor alone was enough to satisfy him. Once he got a Soul Symbol Master to repair it using mental energy flames, this mysterious earth armor will regain its defensive abilities. At that time, under the protection of the mysterious earth armor, his survival rate will surely surge. Besides the mysterious earth armor, he had also obtained several soul treasures and martial art manuals. Finally, he also obtained a mid-ranked symbol puppet that could match up to an advanced form creation stage practitioner. Lin Dong stood up from the ground, before he waved his sleeves and kept both symbol puppets inside his Qian bag. Then, he began to feel a dizzying sensation within his mind. Immediately, his eyebrows gently furrowed. Kid, after you forcefully consumed that fellow's mental energy, you should quickly find a place and start to refine it. That fellow's mental energy is slightly icy cold, and if you do not refine it properly, you will surely suffer. Even though your destiny soul symbols were mirrored after the ancestral symbols, they can only imitate the ancestral symbols' abilities, and they definitely do not possess the same absorption ability as the ancestral symbols. Little Martin casually hovered beside Lin Dong, before it warned him. All right. Lin Dong gently nodded his head. He naturally knew that he must thoroughly refine the mental energy that he had absorbed. However, the most critical matter now was to look for a safe hideout. News of Hua Zong's demise will probably reach Great Puppet City soon. At that time, the ghastly puppet cult outpost stationed there will surely seek revenge by send countless elite practitioners to hunt after me. Lin Dong's eyes glimmered. He knew after killing Hua Zong, he would be in for a difficult time. However, now that he had already killed him, it was too late to regret. Therefore, he could only plan out his next move. I shall leave Great Puppet City first and refine Hua Zong's mental energy inside a deep mudin. Even though the ghastly puppet cult is very powerful, it is no simple feat for them to locate me within these vast mountains. Lin Dong's face was solemn as he contemplated. He could likely match up to the elite practitioners from ghastly puppet cult stationed at Great Puppet City. However, the one that he truly feared was Hua Zong's father. That fact that he could become an elder at ghastly puppet cult indicated that he must be quite powerful. Now that Lin Dong had murdered his son, that old fellow will surely use of all his power to locate him before he slaughtered him. Let's meet up with Little Flame first. A glint flashed across Lin Dong's eyes before his body dashed forth. When he left, he took extraordinary pains to hide his tracks. As Lin Dong departed, this hideous-looking area became eerily silent. The vibrations that were left behind caused most demonic beasts to be fearful of approaching. This silence lasted for nearly half an hour's time, before it was suddenly disrupted by a hurried splitting wind sound. Then, two figures appeared before they landed on a collapsed tree. Their eyes swept across the area, before they finally stopped at an icy cold corpse at the ground. Immediately, both of their bodies stiffened. While their bodies stiffened, the two of them exchanged glances. Both of them could see the terror and awe in each other's eyes. Immediately, their figures flashed before they landed beside Hua Zong. As they stared at the latter's vengeful yet fearful face, the two of them felt a coldness emerge from within their hearts. That kid actually killed Custodian Hua, that eagle-nosed practitioner gulped as he coarsely said. What should we do now? The other man's voice was trembling as he spoke. Hua Zong had a pretty solid standing in ghastly puppet cult, and most importantly, his father was an elder. Therefore, they could only imagine just how enraged that elder would be once news of this matter reached his ears. Let's bring him back first. That little bastard is finished. Soon, he will find out the terrifying consequences that await him, that eagle-nosed practitioner softly said. Then, he bent his body and picked up Hua Zong's corpse before he dashed towards Great Puppet City. As he stared at his back, the other man also gulped. That ghastly puppet cult elder had quite an infamous reputation. Therefore, he could already sense just how terrifying his rage would be. Just like the eagle-nosed practitioner had said, the kid who had killed Hua Zong would doubted wound up in a much more morbid state. Chapter 256, Complete Breakthrough. In the dense woodlands, Lin Dong's figure was just like an athletic leopard, as even the leaves at the tip of his feet did not tremble in the slightest when he landed. Growl! As this figure dashed forth, nearby, suddenly a tiger roar echoed out, before another figure quickly emerged from within the trees and landed solidly in front of that figure. Little Flame. When he saw that Little Flame was safe, Lin Dong heaved a sigh of relief. However, he understood that now was not the time for casual chit-chat. Immediately, his figure flashed before he jumped on that tiger's back. Then, Little Flame released a deep roar before it flapped its lightning wings and hovered into mid-air, before it lightning quick dashed into the deep mountains. With regards to today's matter, Lin Dong was clearly aware of its consequences. Therefore, the most urgent task at hand was to quickly locate a safe hideout in order to refine the powerful yet somewhat chaotic mental energy inside his Nuan Palace. With regards to the manhunt that he would likely face, it was best for him to readjust himself first. Besides, this mountain range is extremely wide, and no matter how influential the ghastly puppet cult was, it was no simple feat for them to locate him in this area. Furthermore, once he regained his peak condition, it would almost be time when that great wasteland's ancient tablet seal weakens. At that time, there will be countless people gushing towards the great wasteland's ancient tablet. Due to the overwhelming human traffic, even a faction as powerful as the ghastly puppet cult will have a difficult time locating him among the crowd. Therefore, Lin Dong could simply make use of that opportunity to slip into the great wasteland's ancient tablet. With this thought in mind, Lin Dong began to gradually calm down. First, he took advantage of Little Flame's speed to travel towards the northwestern direction for half a day's time, before he gradually slowed down when he reached the middle of a deep mountain. Then, he slowly landed onto a tiny valley within. Within that mountain valley, there was a waterfall. At the spot where the water landed, a watery mist emerged. Lin Dong's figure deftly landed on a several meters tall boulder in the middle of that lake, before he promptly sat down on it. He could sense that the mental energy inside his Nuan Palace was becoming increasingly chaotic. Hence, if he did not quickly refine it, it might prove problematic for him in the future. Little Flame, Little Marten, protect me! Lin Dong hurriedly commanded the marten and tiger located beside him, before he immediately shut his eyes. His consciousness quickly entered inside his Nuan Palace. Right now, his Nuan Palace was fairly chaotic as large patches of greyish mental energy were howling around. If they had not been subdued by his 4 destiny soul symbols, these mental energy would have forcefully dashed out of his Nuan Palace. Pfft, once you have entered into my domain, you have no right to throw tantrums. As he stared at the greyish mental energy that were howling inside his Nuan Palace, Lin Dong coldly chuckled. Previously, he did not have time to deal with them. However, now that he was free, it was only going to be a simple matter for him to handle them. With a flick of his mind, a resplendent glow suddenly erupted from his 4 destiny soul symbols inside his Nuan Palace. As these bright lights gushed forth, they shone on the patches of greyish mental energy. Buzz buzz. When those greyish mental energy were shone upon by the bright lights, a buzzing sound immediately erupted. Then, traces of a greyish residue began to slowly seep out from within, before they were directly reduced to nothing under the glow of his destiny soul symbols. Even though Huazong's mental energy was quite formidable, it was pretty rebellious. This was likely due to the fact that he had swallowed several people's mental energy and had failed to thoroughly refine them. Therefore, if one swallowed his mental energy, there was a good chance that it would damage one's cultivation roots. As time passed by, traces of greyish residue continuously seeped out. Then, the color of that formidable mental energy began to gradually change. The dark greyish tinge began to slowly slip away while a peaceful and righteous color took its place. Lin Dong's destiny soul symbols were evidently quite effective at removing the impurities within mental energy. Therefore, in approximately 2 hours' time, the mental energy floating inside his Nuan Palace had already been thoroughly purified. Destiny soul symbols, absorb. When the last trace of greyish residue disappeared, Lin Dong once again heaved a deep sigh of relief. Then, with a flick of his mind, the 4 destiny soul symbols inside his Nuan Palace began to contort before they transformed into destiny swirls. Following which, traces of suction force immediately emerged as they continuously sucked in streams of mental energy. As streams of mental energy were sucked into his destiny swirls, Lin Dong could clearly feel his mental energy growing rapidly. At this rate, Lin Dong could even possibly use this opportunity to cultivate his 5th destiny soul symbol and progress to become a soul symbol master. The sky above the valley began to darken, before a gentle moonlight poured down and shone on the lake. A glittery glow then emerged on the lake's surface. It was a truly beautiful sight. Little Martin hovered above Lin Dong's head as it casually basked in the moonlight. Meanwhile, Little Flame was like a truly loyal guard as it stood beside Lin Dong and cautiously surveyed his surroundings. Any movement in this area could hardly evade its eyes. Huff! This silence lasted for a while, before Lin Dong began to gradually open his tightly shut eyes while he deeply exhaled. The Destiny Soul symbols inside his Nuan Palace were already on autopilot. They absorbed Huazong's purified mental energy. As to whether he could advance to Soul Symbol Master after he finished absorbing, it would be up to his fate and destiny. Kid, it seems like you have reaped much benefits this time. When Lin Dong opened his eyes, Little Martin floated forth before it said with a wide smile. Clearly, it could sense that Lin Dong's mental energy had grown significantly. Lin Dong gently smiled. With a flick of his mind, ripples emerged on the surface on the lake. Then a giant water palm immediately flew out and casually pulverized a giant boulder near the edges of the lake. It seems like compared to before, his mental energy has truly grown. Right now, one could only imagine just how powerful he would be should he successfully advance to Soul Symbol Master. If I guessed correctly, that kid's father should be at advanced Qi creation stage, Little Martin said. Lin Dong casually dismissed that giant water palm, before he gently nodded his head. After he used up all of his techniques, he could safely escape from an initial Qi creation stage practitioner. However, he could not confidently do so when facing an advanced Qi creation stage practitioner. After all, even though they only differed by one cultivation level, the difference between these two stages was akin to a huge gulf. Furthermore, Lin Dong was keenly aware that if he fought against an advanced Qi creation stage practitioner now, he would likely be defeated. Huff! Lin Dong deeply exhaled before his eyes turned somewhat icy cold. Flipping his palm, 2 different colored elixir fruits appeared in his hands. Then, a forceful energy shockwave emerged, before it caused ripples to emerge on the lake. These 2 elixir fruits were naturally the Thousand Beast fruit that Lin Dong had stolen from the ancient dragon ape, and the Starry Yang fruit that he won from the auction. Right now, he was at initial form creation stage. If he could successfully refine the Thousand Beast fruit, he should be able to break through to advanced form creation stage. More importantly, this Thousand Beast fruit had excellent tempering properties on one's body. Therefore, Lin Dong could even take advantage of its tempering properties to master Jade Thunder Body. At that time, his abilities will surge to a completely different level. Right now, Lin Dong was unable to match up against an advanced Qi creation stage practitioner. However, once he broke through to Soul Symbol Master, advanced form creation stage and mastered Jade Thunder Body, in addition to the other tricks up his sleeve, even an advanced Qi creation stage practitioner will pose little threat to him. Heh, kid! Are you planning to gamble on it? When he saw Lin Dong take out the Thousand Beast fruit, Little Martin involuntarily chuckled. I don't like to stir trouble. However, since they continue to persist on, then don't blame me for being ruthless. Lin Dong gently smiled. Even though he had fled quite a distance away, he felt like he was being marked by some indiscernible item. Therefore, it would not be a wise long-term decision for him to merely evade them. Since he could not flee from them, he could only quickly upgrade his strength. Then, at that time, even if Huazong's father truly came to avenge his son, he would possess the ability to fight against him and he would no longer need to fear him. That Thousand Beast fruit was formed by countless demonic beast essence blood, and it is extremely savage. Even if you used Starry Yang fruit to temper it, it would still be pretty risky. Are you certain about your decision? Little Martin warned. Just keep me safe. Lin Dong smiled. Without further ado, he lowered his head and looked at the 2 elixir fruits, that were giving off a terrifying energy vibration. Then, he took in a deep breath before he directly stuffed the 2 elixir fruits into his mouth simultaneously. Boom! When these 2 elixir fruits entered into his mouth, they swiftly dissipated before an enormous and terrifying energy wave gushed towards Lin Dong's every extremity just like a tidal storm. Boom boom! Bits of the energy even escaped Lin Dong's body and directly blew a giant water column inside the lake. As a watery mist filled the horizons, little Martin stared at Lin Dong, whose skin had turned blood red, while a solemn expression fleeted across its eyes. The thousand beast fruit was meant to be consumed by powerful demonic beasts like the ancient dragon ape. Even though Lin Dong's physical body was extremely strong, it was still highly risky for him to forcefully refine this thousand beast fruit. Kid, whether you emerge as a dragon or fall to become a snake, it all depends on you now. Just as Lin Dong was at a critical juncture in his training, at a distance away, inside Great Puppet City, the atmosphere was turning increasingly tense. As they stared at the numerous ghastly puppet cult elite practitioners that were gathering together, many people did not know what their exact intentions were. However, everyone knew that someone was headed for a bad time. In Great Desolate Province, offending the heinous ghastly puppet cult was an extremely stupid move. Chapter 257, Race Against Time. Great Puppet City, Ghastly Puppet Cult Division. Inside the spacious hall, many figures were scattered around while a dark and tense atmosphere stealthily set in, causing most people's hearts to be burdened. In fact, for most of them, they ended up unconsciously suppressing their breath. In the large hall now, nearly every elite member of this ghastly puppet cult division had gathered here. However, right now, most of their heads were lowered down as they did not dare to look right at the front. At that spot, there was an elder dressed in grey robes silently seated down. Even though there were no emotions on his old and wrinkled face, everyone could sense a maniacal killing intent flowing below that emotionless face. In the middle of that large hall were two figures standing in trepidation with their heads lowered down. The two of them were precisely the eagle-nosed duo that had accompanied Hua Zong to hunt after Lin Dong. Right now, both of their bodies were continuously trembling as they were evidently frightened. According to the two of you, because both of you fell for his diversion trick, you caused my Zong to be in danger. When he heard the trembling words from the eagle-nosed duo, that elder seated in front casually opened his mouth. His voice sounded exceedingly coarse and cold. Just hearing the tone of his voice alone was enough to cause one's heart to turn cold. Elder Hua, at that time, we thought that Custodian Hua would be able to handle that kid by himself. As he detected the anger in the elder's voice, that eagle-nosed practitioner hurriedly explained. Bang! However, before he could finish speaking, a vicious Yuan power exploded forth and viciously slammed against his body, causing him to be directly blown away before he finally slammed against a pillar. Immediately, he vomited out a mouthful of fresh blood. Useless bastards! So many of you went after a single brat, yet you suffered so many casualties. What is the point of keeping all of you? That elder's voice was icy cold while his glare resembled that of a devil. Your subordinates have failed you. That eagle-nosed practitioner spat out the fresh blood inside his mouth. He did not dare to object any more as he hurriedly replied, while his face turned pale. Elder Hua, though administratorly had failed in his duties, now is not the time to pursue this matter. The most important thing now is to capture that bastard and avenge Custodian Hua. A middle-aged man, that likely held some status, immediately spoke up. That little bastard is quite cunning. He must have hidden himself within the deep mountains. It will not be easy to locate him, another middle-aged man sighed as he said. Send out a search warrant. Li Go, I want you to sketch that little bastard's face and spread it across the entire Great Desolate Province. I want to ensure that he will have no place to hide in this entire Great Desolate Province. Standing ahead, the elder in grey robes once again coldly said. Yes. When they heard his words, that eagle-nosed practitioner hurriedly agreed respectfully. Based on the influence that their ghastly puppet sect held in Great Desolate Province, if they sent out a search warrant, then their intended target would be in for a rough time. Administrator Chen, take me to the place where Zong was killed. If that little bastard thinks that he can easily escape from me, he is simply too naive. When he is captured by me, I will make him understand that living can be even worse than death. That elder in grey robes solemnly stood up before he walked out of the large hall. The other advanced form creation stage practitioner that had accompanied Hua Zong to hunt after Lin Dong, hurriedly followed behind. As they stared at that menacing grey-robed elder, who was filled with a vicious killing intent, everyone silently gulped. Right now, everyone knew that this elder, who was once infamous throughout Great Desolate Province, was about to unleash his cold and vicious side again. The actions of the ghastly puppet cult stationed in Great Puppet City were so significant that they naturally could not evade the attention of the other major factions. Especially when they discovered that Elder Huagu, who had always been cultivating within ghastly puppet cult headquarters, had arrived in Great Puppet City, it caused a minor commotion. Several of these factions even sent out spies in order to uncover the reason behind the commotion at ghastly puppet cult. Great Demonic Sect's division was located at the southwest corner of Great Puppet City. Right now, on top of a tower, a beautiful figure was leaning on a pillar, while her seductive eyes stared towards the direction of ghastly puppet cult. "Miss, we have uncovered the reason behind the commotion at ghastly puppet cult. It is because Huazong has been killed." Standing behind that bewitching beauty who wore a black dress, a figure suddenly appeared before he respectfully said. "Oh!" When she heard those words, that beauty gently lifted her eyebrows before she tilted her head. She was the person that Lin Dong had encountered at the auction, Mu Qian. It's no wonder that old fellow Huagu has came to Great Puppet City. It turns out his son was killed. Mu Qian suddenly smiled coyly. Even though Great Demonic Sect and ghastly puppet cult seemed to have a cordial relationship on the surface, they had clashed several times in the dark. Now that they had suffered a major loss, she was naturally delighted to enjoy the show. "Who killed Huazong? According to my sources, that fellow should have advanced to Soul Symbol Master. Furthermore, with assistance from his symbol puppet and protection from mysterious earth armor, even an advanced form creation stage practitioner cannot kill him." Mu Qianqin's beautiful eyes darted before she asked with a smile. "It is reputed to be a man named Lin Dong. He had a small conflict with Huazong at the auction house. After which, when Lin Dong went to refine his soul treasure at the Thousand Treasure Tower, he was discovered by Huazong. It seems like Huazong tried to forcefully buy over his soul treasure, and they eventually left on unhappy terms." "Lin Dong? It is actually him." When she heard those words, Mu Qianqin was instantly taken aback, while a tinge of shock flashed across her beautiful eyes. Evidently, she never expected that Lin Dong had actually killed Huazong. This Lin Dong's strength is truly surprising. It seems like he has hidden it pretty well. However, now that he had drawn out that old fellow Huagu, it would probably be a tricky issue. Mu Qian was somewhat regretful as she said. Huagu's reputation was well known throughout Great Desolate Province. Since Huagu was personally taking charge this time, Lin Dong would probably meet his demise. With regards to the latter, she had thought about asking him to join them. However, right now, she could only dismiss this idea. "Keep a close eye on them. If there are any new developments, report to me immediately." "Yes." When he heard Mu Qianqin's command, that figure hurriedly replied. Then, his figure flashed before he quickly exited the tower. Mu Qianqin's eyes twinkled seductively, as she stared towards the outer regions of the city. Moments later, she softly sighed as she muttered, "What a pity. When that old fellow Huagu makes his move, there will not even be a body left. This time, Lin Dong is in deep trouble." Just as the entire Great Puppet City was somewhat heated up by the actions of the ghastly puppet cult, over at a distant mountain valley, it was totally serene. Little Martin hovered in midair as its eyes stared somewhat solemnly at Lin Dong, who was seated in the middle of a lake. Right now, the latter's skin was completely blood red. In fact, drops of fresh blood were seeping out of his pores, before they dyed the boulder below him blood red. Just as little Martin said, the energy within the thousand beast fruit was extremely savage. Even though he tempered it with starry yang fruit, its energy was still too much for most ordinary people to handle. If Lin Dong had not mastered Bronze Thunder Body and Demonic Ape transformation, right now, his body would have likely been blown to bits by the savage energy within that thousand beast fruit. Little Flame patrolled around the boulders. Right now, it could feel that Lin Dong was not in a stable condition. A tinge of anxiety was contained in its tiger eyes. However, in order not to disturb the latter, it chose to suppress its voice. Under Little Marten and Little Flame's intense attention, Lin Dong's body grew increasingly reddish, while traces of fresh blood on his body's surface began to transform into a blood cocoon. Right now, his appearance seemed quite alarming. "This kid is simply too anxious," Little Marten furrowed his eyebrows. He could sense that Lin Dong's current condition was not ideal. Right now, there must surely be a revolutionary transformation occurring within his body. If Lin Dong could endure this transformation, his strength would likely surge. However, if he failed to do so, his body would likely be destroyed into pieces. Time stealthily passed by. In a blink of an eye, half a day's time had passed by. Meanwhile, Lin Dong's breath became increasingly faint. In fact, his heart rate seemed to have slowed down significantly. Crack. This nearly lifeless state continued for an hour, before suddenly, an extremely soft sound echoed out. Then, cracks began to emerge on the blood cocoon on Lin Dong's body, before pieces began to fall off. When those blood shackles fell off, Lin Dong's bronze-green skin was slowly revealed. However, right now, there seemed to be a tinge of a warm jade-like color mixed within the dark bronze-green hue. Is Bronze Thunder body evolving? When he saw that jade-like speck, Little Marten's eyes sparkled. Promptly, its eyes turned exceedingly solemn. This was the most critical juncture for Lin Dong. If he could successfully evolve Great Thunder body to Jade Thunder body, then Lin Dong would be able to completely absorb the tyrannical energy within the Thousand Beast Fruit. Growl. Little Flame also knew about Lin Dong's current predicament. Immediately, it released a deep growl before it fluttered its lightning wings and flew into the skies. Then, it majestically surveyed its surroundings while acting as Lin Dong's most loyal bodyguard. Just as Lin Dong was in a race against time to evolve his Jade Thunder body, at a distant mountain range, an elder dressed in grey robes was coldly surveying a messy site, which had just been through a massive battle. Vibrations from Symbol Puppet Mark. That elder's eyes suddenly stopped, before he suddenly lifted his head violently. Then, he stared at a distant mountain range, before an exceedingly venomous smile emerged on his wrinkled face. "Little bastard, you will not escape from me." Chapter 258, Caught. There was a glittering glow on the calm surface of the lake. On top of a boulder in the middle of that lake, a figure that resembled a statue was seated there. He did not move an inch while his body temperature had even fallen to freezing point. Meanwhile, his breathing turned exceedingly faint. However, Little Marten, who was now hovering in mid-air, knew that this was a critical breakthrough moment for Lin Dong. If he was able to replace the bronze-green hue on his skin with that warm jade-like glow, then Lin Dong would be able to successfully master Jade Thunder body. At that time, his strength would surely surge. In the middle of that serene lake, Little Marten was constantly keeping close tabs on Lin Dong. However, suddenly its expression froze, before it quickly turned its head and turned to look towards a distance away. A dramatic change occurred in its eyes, as it sensed an exceedingly powerful aura that was dashing towards them from that direction. This aura does not seem friendly. Little Marten's eyes glimmered, before his expression turned increasingly solemn as it clearly detected just how formidable that aura was. Judging from the current situation, it seems like the latter was evidently headed for them. They are indeed skilled. They actually managed to track us down so quickly. Just as Little Marten's expression was in flux, Little Flame, who was hovering in mid-air, also managed to detect that powerful aura that was headed for them. Immediately, it released a tiger roar, before lightning sparks emerged and hovered around its body. Swoosh! Under the undivided attention of one tiger and one marten, a glowing flash quickly emerged from the distant horizons, before it transformed into an elder dressed in grey robes, who was hovering on a large bone spear. That elder's face was grim, while his eyes stared directly at the lake in the valley. Then, his words filled with a thick killing intent sounded out. "Little bastard, after you killed my son, do you think that you can escape?" Indeed. When it sensed the thick killing intent contained in the elder's tone, Little Marten's heart sunk. It had never expected that this old fellow could hunt them down so quickly. Furthermore, right now Lin Dong was at the most critical juncture in his training and he must not be disrupted. Growl. Just as little Martin's eyes glimmered, Little Flame had already roared ferociously at that individual, which had disrupted Lin Dong's training. As it opened its tiger mouth, a lightning ball emerged before it viciously flew towards that elder, who was hovering on a bone spear. That elder, dressed in grey robes, was hovering on his giant bone spear. His old and wrinkled face stared coldly at that figure, who was seated in the middle of a lake. With regards to Little Flame's attack, even before it reached his body, it was already deflected by an invisible shield. It seems like this little bastard is at a critical juncture in his cultivation. Oh well, that will save me some effort. Let me capture you first and hack off all your limbs, before I display your body in Great Puppet City for 10 days. That grey-robed elder's eyesight was sharp and venomous. He immediately detected that Lin Dong was currently unable to retaliate. Therefore, he immediately chuckled, before his hands stretched forth and transformed into a greyish giant mental energy hand and immediately swiped at Lin Dong's head. Pfft! When he saw that grey-robed elder make his move, Little Martin's eyes turned cold before it coldly snorted. Immediately, it waves its claws before streaks of dark purple light flew forth and stuck itself onto that giant mental energy hand. Then, its terrifying corrosive property instantly reduced that giant mental energy hand into nothing. Oh! Little Martin's move had evidently far exceeded that grey-robed elder's expectations, as he immediately exclaimed in shock. His eyes glanced callously at Little Martin, before his pupils suddenly shrunk. Oh, it's actually a demon soul. Ha! Judging from your abilities, you should have been extremely powerful when you had a physical body. Unfortunately, right now, you are nothing in front of me. Get lost! After he shouted, greyish air current instantly erupted from the elder's robes. These air currents were extremely cold and vicious. After they somersaulted in mid-air, they immediately swept viciously towards Little Martin just like a blizzard. As it faced that grey-robed elder's attack, Little Martin hurriedly waved its claws. Then, dark purple rings immediately emerged, before they turned into glowing halos and protected its body. Bang bang bang! That greyish air current heavily slammed against the dark purple glowing halos around Little Martin's body, before they released an earth-shattering noise. Meanwhile, Little Martin's body was continuously blown back. Evidently, based on its current strength, it was unable to match up against Huagu, who was at advanced Qi creation stage. Growl! While Little Martin was continuously pushed back by Huagu, Little Flame released an enraged roar. Lightning glow undulated around its body, before it directly flapped its lighting wings and charged towards Huagu. Get lost! Huagu's expression was venomous. Then, the greyish bone spear beneath his feet was just like a baseball bat, before it flew forth and viciously smacked Little Flame with a tremendous force. Growl! After it was viciously smacked by that bone spear, Little Flame's body was immediately blown away as it released a series of pained squeals. Then, its massive body heavily slammed against a mountain boulder, before it blew that boulder apart. Though it suffered a heavy blow, Little Flame's eyes turned increasingly blood red. A lightning glow sparkled while every hair on its body stood up. Then, it once again fearlessly charged towards Huagu. Boom! Boom! However, based on Little Flame's current strength, it was naturally unable to match up against Huagu. Therefore, each time it charged forward, the final outcome remained the same as it continued to be coldly beaten up by Huagu. Right now, it seemed extremely hideous. You son of a bitch! When it saw how Huagu was tormenting Little Flame, an intense rage unknowingly surfaced within Little Martin's eyes. Promptly, it sucked in a deep breath, before it viciously pointed its claws. Then, it opened its mouth and spat out a large amount of dark purple light beams. When these dark purple light beams emerged, they swiftly gathered together before they transformed into a glowing dark purple swirling blade. That swirling blade was filled with a powerful aura, that cannot be described with words alone. It seems like it was powerful enough to rip apart the heavens. Heaven-ripping magic wheel. When that glowing dark purple swirling blade appeared, Little Martin's eyes slightly dimmed. Then, its claws pointed towards Huagu, who was hovering in midair. Promptly, the glowing blade trembled, before it disappeared in the next instance. However, the instance that glowing dark purple swirling blade disappeared, Huagu, who was hovering in midair, began to feel a heart-palpitating sensation. His countless years of life and death battle experience evidently served a useful purpose. Immediately, he gripped his hand, before that giant bone spear immediately appeared in his hand. Then, mighty Yuan power gushed forth just like a tidal wave. Instantly, bone shadows filled the horizons, before it directly transformed into bone walls and protected Huagu's entire body. Heavenly Bone Wall. Dense bone shadows, real or fake, surrounded Huagu's entire body. It seems like instantly, the entire sky was being filled with white bone shadows. Clang clang clang. Just as these bone shadows formed, a dark purple glow suddenly emerged out from nowhere before it instantly blew apart countless bone shadows. Even though the bone shadow's defensive ability was quite powerful, it seems like that glowing dark purple blade was the sharpest object in the world, as it directly ripped through the bone walls. Swoosh! In a blink of an eye, the bone shadows that filled the horizons had been thoroughly destroyed. As he stared at that dark purple glow that was growing rapidly in his eyes, a tinge of shock fleeted across Huagu's face. Immediately, the Yuan power inside his body unceremoniously erupted forth, before the glow on his bone spear turned increasingly resplendent. Finally, with a terrifying force, he slowly pointed it against that glowing dark purple swirling blade. Cling! A crisp sound echoed out in midair. Then, at the next instance, an exceedingly formidable energy shockwave erupted forth in midair. Boom! Dozens of water column directly erupted from the lake below, as they shot towards the heavens, before they finally crashed down. It was an exceedingly magnificent sight. What a pity! Little Martin stared at Huagu, who had been forced to retreat several dozen steps by its attack, before it secretly sighed. At its peak, if it executed this attack, this entire mountain range would likely be split apart. However, right now, it could not even finish off a Qi creation stage old tortoise. Just as little Martin sighed, Huagu, who was hovering in midair, was completely shocked. He lowered his head to look at that tiger, before he turned to look at little Martin, with an exceedingly solemn expression. For that previous attack, if he had reacted even a little slower, he would have likely died. It seems like that demon soul bastard was quite skilled. Judging from the fact that you have been dead for a while, you probably can't execute such a powerful attack consecutively. Huagu stared at little Martin's eyes, which had evidently dimmed, before a sinister laughter appeared on his wrinkled face. Little Martin's eyes glimmered. Its previous attack was enough to kill an advanced Qi creation stage practitioner. However, the toll that it took on its body was extremely heavy. Therefore, in a short period of time, it was indeed unable to use it again. If that's the case, I shall kill you first. Huagu laughed venomously. His hand gripped tightly onto his bone spear, while his face looked just like a devil. Then, he tapped his foot and palm against the skies, before his figure immediately dashed forth. That bone spear brought forth a terrifying chill, before a formidable hurricane formed at the tip of that spear. Finally, it lightning quick flew towards little Martin, that was located below. Based on the strength of his attack, it seems like Huagu was evidently wary of little Martin. When it saw that it had been targeted by Huagu, little Martin's expression changed. As it frantically waved its claws, dark purple light beams quickly gathered ahead of it and transformed into a dark purple glowing shield. Bang! The instant that glowing shield formed, that bone spear arrived before a hurricane-like force swept forth. In an instant, that glowing shield immediately exploded. When that glowing shield exploded, little Martin's body was thoroughly exposed to that bone spear. Growl! Nearby, though little Flame was heavily injured, when it saw that little Martin was in danger, it immediately released an enraged roar. Then, it fluttered its lightning wings as it tried to assist it. God damn it, I have yet to exact my revenge. At this juncture, little Martin seemed somewhat helpless. However, judging from the cold glint glimmering in its eyes, it had evidently not given up yet. Just as it was about to make its last stand, an eruption suddenly occurred at the lake below, before countless water columns shot towards the heavens. Ding! While those water columns shot towards the heavens, a resplendent golden glow that was as bright as sunlight erupted forth. Then, it flew forth at a speed that was barely discernible to the naked eye, before it directly zipped past little Martin and solidly rammed against that bone spear. When it saw that ancient halberd was past, little Martin heaved a deep sigh of relief. Its eyes glanced to the side, before it faintly saw an extremely powerful energy shock wave emerging from a jade-like figure. Has that kid finally succeeded? Chapter 259, Fending Off Advanced Chi Creation Stage. Cling! A clear and crisp noise erupted in midair before an extremely formidable shock wave swept forth. At the epicenter of the collision, the ancient halberd and bone spear were releasing a golden and grayish glow respectively, while a terrifying energy shockwave spread forth. In fact, even the surrounding air was forcefully blown apart. Boom! The airwaves swept forth before the ancient halberd and bone spear were both blown back. As little Martin was too close to the collision, its body was directly blown away by the impact. Promptly, a hand appeared behind its back and stabilized its body. Kid, if you were a second later, I would have to risk my life again. Little Martin's figure became slightly illusionary due to those airwaves. Then, it tilted its head and looked at the figure behind, before it heaved a sigh of relief and said. Behind little Martin, was a figure hovering on a blade shadow. That figure's body was straight like a pencil, while a formidable and domineering aura emerging from his body. Of course, this figure was naturally Lin Dong, who had just emerged from his cultivation. Right now, the bronze-green hue on his skin had completely dissipated. In its place, was a warm jade-like glow, which caused his skin to seem just like a solid and translucent metal. This was the second stage in Great Sun Thunder Yuan, Jade Thunder Body. It seems like this time, with aid from the Thousand Beast Fruit, Lin Dong was finally able to advance Bronze Thunder Body to Jade Thunder Body. As a result, his battle ability would have surged to a completely different level. Furthermore, the Yuan power vibrations that seeped out from Lin Dong's body was several times more powerful than before. Evidently, right now, his Yuan power cultivation had once again broken through to advanced form creation stage. After completing his cultivation, Lin Dong had practically undergone a revolutionary transformation. Lin Dong's feet stepped onto his blade shadow, while a warm jade-like glow glimmered on his body. His eyes stared coldly at Hua Gu, who was at a distance away, before he turned to look at Little Flame, who was now riddled with injuries. Promptly, rage flashed across his eyes. I never expected that a little bastard like you can actually successfully break through at such a critical juncture. Hua Gu's venomous eyes were just like sharp knives, as they swept across Lin Dong's body, while he coldly spoke. Though he spoke callously, a small storm was raging inside Hua Gu's heart. In their previous short exchange, he could sense Lin Dong's formidable strength. His strength far exceeds that of an ordinary form creation stage practitioner. It seems like the reason why that fellow could kill Hua Gu was because he was pretty skilled. Old fart, your son tried to snatch my ancient halberd. He deserves what he had got. Lin Dong's coldly said. Even if my son killed you, he would still be righteous. Just like how it is completely justified for me to kill you now. Hua Gu's words were extremely forceful and domineering. In his opinion, it seems like if Hua Zong wanted to snatch Lin Dong's ancient halberd, then even if he killed Lin Dong, he would still be justified. Indeed, it seems like that young dog is similar to his papa dog. When he heard Hua Gu's words, Lin Dong was extremely infuriated. Little bastard, swear all you want now. Later, when I capture you, you will think that death is a luxury. Hua Gu's old and wrinkly face was extremely hideous as he stared at Lin Dong. He did not bother to speak with him anymore because there was no way he could ever forgive his son's killer. Therefore, there was only one possible outcome. That was to capture and torment Lin Dong, in order to avenge Hua Zong's death. Soul Destruction Bone Spear. That Huagu was indeed vicious. Immediately, formidable Yuan power gushed out, before an extremely icy cold grey glow erupted on his bone spear. Then, the greyish glow gathered forth, before the bone spear was viciously flung towards Lin Dong, with a force that was enough to instantaneously destroy an advanced form creation stage elite practitioner. When he saw Huagu instantly attack, a solemn expression fleeted across Lin Dong's face. Advanced Qi creation stage was one entire cultivation stage above his. Even though he possessed many tricks up his sleeves, he did not dare to be negligent at all. Demonic Ape Transformation. A deep roar sounded out from Lin Dong's throat, before his body promptly swelled by several times. Right now, he looked just like a giant jade statue. In fact, this time, there was a golden glow shimmering at Lin Dong's forehand. Faintly, it seems like a golden dragon horn that was similar to the ancient dragon apes. He is actually able to use the ancient dragon apes' bloodlines to such an extent. When it saw the golden horn on Lin Dong's forehead, a tinge of shock flashed across little Martin's eyes. Heavenly Scales Halberd Techniques, Python Scale Halberd. Lin Dong's body surged several times, while a majestic strength, that was able to uproot mountains, gushed out from his body just like a tidal wave. His palm tightly gripped onto the ancient heavenly scale halberd, which had also grown by several times. Then, a resplendent golden glow gushed forth, before it transformed into a giant python shadow and directly clashed against that bone spear with a terrifying force. Boom! A loud and deafening noise erupted in mid-air, before giant water columns once again erupted from the lake below. When that Yuan power shock wave swept forth, Lin Dong's body hurriedly retreated several steps in mid-air, before he managed to stabilize himself. Then, as he stared at Huagu, who was also being forced to retreat several steps, he involuntarily laughed out loud. Right now, based on his current strength, in addition to demonic ape transformation and jade thunder body, he was able to match up against an advanced Qi creation stage elite practitioner. Haha, old fart, you don't have the qualifications to kill me. Lin Dong laughed heartily, before he gripped his palm. Then, a large and resplendent golden platform instantly formed above his head. Promptly, he stretched his arm out before his fingers penetrated deep within the golden platform. One hand held onto his halberd, while the other grabbed onto his golden platform. While that golden glow flowed, he seemed just like the god of war, filled with an extremely formidable and menacing aura. Swoosh! With a glimmering golden glow, Lin Dong directly dashed forth. Streaks of formidable halberd shadows were formed from his ancient halberd, while an extremely domineering shock wind accompanied his golden platform, before they were both lightning-quick flung towards Huagu. Clang clang clang! As he faced Lin Dong's somewhat maniacal attack, Huagu's face turned slightly steely green. He immediately pushed out every bit of formidable Yuan power, that was only available to an advanced Qi creation stage elite practitioner. Then, the bone spear in his hands was filled with an gloomy and chilling cold, before it viciously collided against the halberd shadows and golden platform. Their battle was extremely intense. Two figures were flashing in midair, and each time they collided, a terrifying series of shock waves would erupt forth and cause waves to emerge in the lake below. Everything within 100 meters radius was thoroughly wrecked by them. By stacking his Jade Thunder body and demonic ape transformation, together with his keen mental energy sensors, this kid has become incredibly powerful. In fact, he is even able to match up against an advanced Qi creation stage practitioner. As it stared at that intense battle in mid-air, shock flashed across little Martin's eyes. After all, Lin Dong and Huagu's cultivation levels differed by one entire level. However, there is a time limit for demonic ape transformation and Jade Thunder body. When that time comes, Lin Dong would probably lose out to Huagu. Little Martin's eyes glimmered. It was keenly aware of Lin Dong's weaknesses. Even though Lin Dong was extremely powerful, he could not sustain it for a long time. Therefore, if this fight dragged on, his advantage will gradually dwindle. Little bastard, once your physical enhancing martial arts wears off, I will make you beg for your own death. Of course, with regards to this weakness, not only did little Martin know about it, but Lin Dong's current opponent, Hua Gu, also knew about it. After all, in this whole world, there were no physical enhancing marital arts that did not possess a time limit. Therefore, while he waved his bone spear and defended against Lin Dong's formidable attacks, a venomous smile emerged on his lips as he chuckled. "I am afraid you won't have the opportunity to." When he heard those words, Lin Dong smiled before his eyes promptly turned icy cold. Then, he viciously flung the golden platform in his hands towards Hua Gu directly. Bang! Hua Gu's old and wrinkled face was icy cold. Then, his bone spear transformed into a greyish shadow before it dashed forth and directly penetrated through the golden platform. With a jolt of Yuan power, he directly blew away that golden platform. When his golden platform was blown away, Lin Dong's figure swiftly retreated. As he retreated back, he gripped his palm before his spirit accumulation praying mat instantly emerged. Immediately, an extremely formidable Yuan power and mental energy gushed inside it. Room. When these two powerful energy sources gushed into the spirit accumulation praying mat, a golden glow emerged on the praying mat, before an extremely rich and potent Yuan essence energy emerged. Heavenly Scales Halberd Techniques, Heavenly Dragon Halberd. Lin Dong's face was solemn. As he jerked the ancient halberd in his hand, a resplendent golden glow gushed forth, while that ball of Yuan essence energy also gushed onto the tip of his halberd. Growl! Golden glow filled the horizons, before a gigantic golden dragon shadow was directly formed from the golden glow. A gentle yet peculiar pressure immediately swept forth, causing the Yuan power inside Hua Gu's body to seem somewhat lacking. That little bastard actually knows such a powerful martial arts. As he stared at that golden dragon shadow emerging from within golden glow, even an elite practitioner like Hua Gu sucked in a breath of cold air. A tinge of shock flashed across his old and wrinkly face, before his body began to promptly retreat, while streams of rich Yuan power continuously erupted from his body. Thousand bone-chilling armor. Thick and greyish Yuan power swirled, before they swiftly gathered together. In mere seconds, they had transformed into a gigantic white bone armor, which wrapped itself around Hua Gu's entire body. On top of those white bones, a greyish glow glimmered, giving the armor an indestructible feel. "Old dog, watch me turn you into a dead dog in one move." Lin Dong stood within the golden glow, while his eyes stared coldly at Hua Gu, who was wrapped by his white bone armor. This was the most powerful attack that he could execute currently. Since he knew that he could not allow this fight to drag on, he must end it in one blow. Growl! After Lin Dong shouted, that giant golden shadow once again released an earth-shattering dragon roar, that caused one's soul to shiver, before it flew towards that white bone armor with a formidable force that could even terrify a Qi creation stage elite practitioner. That golden dragon flew across the horizons with a terrifying speed, before it viciously slammed against that white bone armor. Instantly, an earthquake seemingly erupted in this mountain peak, as it began to vibrate maniacally. Lin Dong's attack was actually this terrifying. Chapter 260, Blown Back. The astonishing clash erupted in the sky, as the entire mountain valley shook maniacally. Large cracks swiftly spread out, while huge rocks crazily fell from the cliffs, crashing into the lake with a huge rumbling noise, causing huge waves which were hundreds of meters tall. Rumble! Waves swept across the lake, as a shockingly loud noise thundered. The entire mountain valley had been completely destroyed due to this terrifying clash. Little Martin floated in the air, while it concentrated on the golden glow. This attack could be considered as Lin Dong's ultimate attack. With the power of Devil Ape transformation and Jade Thunder body, combined with the Heavenly Scale Halberd technique and the might of the Yuan essence energy, this blow could even completely decimate a Qi creation practitioner. However, Hua Gu was evidently not easy to deal with. This old guy had not only cultivated his Yuan power to the advanced Qi creation stage, but even his mental energy cultivation was rather high. Hence, it was no simple matter to kill him. Bang! Under little Martin's attentive gaze, a figure suddenly shouts out from within the golden glow, before fiercely shooting into the lake below like a meteor from the sky, causing huge waves to emerge. As the figure fell into lake, he somewhat sorely swept out, and could not help but spit out a mouthful of fresh blood from his mouth. Looking at his appearance, it was Lin Dong. When it saw Lin Dong vomit blood and retreat, little Martin was taken aback. Soon after, it looked towards the nearby sky. At that area, the golden glow quickly began to dissipate. While that golden light faded, a humongous white bone armor once again quietly appeared in front of little Martin's eyes. To think that he had actually resisted it. Staring at the unmoving white bone armor, disbelief flitted across little Martin's eyes. The offensive power of Lin Dong's previous strike was extremely overwhelming, and even an advanced Qi creation stage Hua Gu could not possibly so easily withstand such an attack. Above the lake, Lin Dong's expression did not change due to this fact. He wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth, as he firmly stared at the white bone armor which silently floated in the air. Crack! Under the unblinking gazes of one man and one Martin, a tiny sound suddenly stealthily sounded out in the sky. After which, tiny cracks started to appear on the white bone armor at an alarming rate. In a short time that did not exceed a few blinks, the enormous white bone armor was already covered in numerous cracks. Bang! The final crack stealthily appeared. Then, just like the last straw that broke the camel's back, the entire white bone armor was immediately blown apart before it turned into countless glowing dots that filled the horizons. When that white bone armor blew apart, Hua Gu, who was hidden within, was instantly revealed. There were no emotions on his face, while his body maintained an upright posture, with both palms stretched forth. However, in the next instance, a series of explosive noises sounded out just like a firecracker, before streams of blood continuously spurted out from his body. Bang bang bang! While Lin Dong and little Martin watched on, Hua Gu's body was violently blown back. Furthermore, each time he took a step back, a bloody mist would erupt on his body, while his aura became increasingly weak. Buzz buzz! Hua Gu violently retreated for nearly 100 steps, before he stabilized himself. Immediately, he vomited another mouthful of fresh blood. Right now, his old and wrinkled face was extremely pale, and he seemed extremely hideous. However, just as he vomited out that last mouthful of blood, Hua Gu regained some of his senses, before a rich awe gushed into his eyes. He had never expected that he would suffer such a heavy injury due to Lin Dong's attack. With regards to Lin Dong's previous attack, if he had not executed his most powerful defensive maneuver at a critical juncture, right now, his whole body would have likely been ruptured into bloody pulps by that terrifying force. How can that little bastard execute such a terrifying attack? As he detected the severity of injuries that he suffered, Hua Gu was almost overwhelmed with rage. In his opinion, since he was at advanced Qi creation stage, it should be a walk in the park for him to kill Lin Dong. However, the current reality showed him the folly of his thinking. Not only did he fail to kill Lin Dong easily, he had nearly died at his hands. However, though he was overwhelmed with rage, that Hua Gu was no fool. Though he knew that Lin Dong would not be able to pull off such a powerful attack consecutively, owing to his own severe injuries, he no longer possessed absolute confidence that he could kill Lin Dong. Furthermore, if the latter had other tricks up his sleeves, then he may even possibly lose his life. Several minutes ago, Hua Gu would have definitely scoffed at this thought. However, after experiencing that intense battle, he had grown wary of Lin Dong and he did not bother to doubt if that latter had other tricks remaining. "Ha, old dog! You are truly hardy." Just as this thought flashed across Hua Gu's mind, Lin Dong's eyes gently twinkled before he chuckled. However, while he chuckled, his heart began to turn increasingly vigilant. That previous attack had took a huge toll on him. Furthermore, there was a time limit to demonic ape transformation and jade thunder body. Now that he had failed to kill Hua Gu, if the latter continued to battle on, he would likely begin to gradually lose out. When he thought of this point, Lin Dong's eyes slightly darkened. Then, a savage expression fleeted across his eyes, before he tightly gripped onto his ancient halberd and activated the remaining Yuan power inside his body. Swoosh! However, just as Lin Dong activated his Yuan power and prepared for a fight, when Hua Gu, who was in mid-air, saw this situation, his facial expression changed drastically. Then, his body was just like an alarmed chicken before he quickly retreated. Then, to Lin Dong's bewilderment, he began to flee. "Little bastard, just you wait. After you killed my son, we cannot exist in the same world. I will not let you go easily." While Hua Gu quickly fled, his enraged roars swiftly spread out and echoed inside the mountain valley. This. Lin Dong was somewhat flabbergasted as he stared at Hua Gu, who was fleeing faster than a rabbit. For a moment, he was unable to regain his senses. Though he knew that Hua Gu had definitely suffered after receiving his previous attack, it had also taken a huge toll on him. Therefore, if they continued to battle on, the final outcome would still be uncertain. However, this old fellow, actually was such a wimp. "Heh, it seems like that old fellow was scared off by your previous attack." Little Martin was similarly shocked by this scene, before it paused for a moment and chuckled. Lin Dong helplessly shook his hand, before he waved his sleeve. Then, a symbol puppet appeared ahead of him. That was precisely the symbol puppet that was obtained from Hua Zong. "That old fellow should have used the mark inside this symbol puppet to trace us. Once I erase this mark, that old fellow should not be able to track us down." With a flick of his mind, a powerful mental energy forcefully entered into the symbol puppet. Now that he was a full-fledged soul symbol master, it was a simple feat for him to erase Hua Zong's mental energy mark. Hence, in a few minutes' time, he opened his eyes after he successfully erased the mark inside the symbol puppet. "Let's leave this area now. This old fellow is truly out for blood this time. Previously, he chased after you alone. Later, when he brings along several elite practitioners from Ghastly Puppet Cult, the situation would be totally different. Therefore, it would be best for us to leave this area as soon as possible." After he resolved this threat, Lin Dong heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he waved towards Little Flame, who was nearby, before the latter immediately pounced over and transformed into a little kitten and jumped into Lin Dong's arms. "That old fart! One day, I will make you pay for this." As he stared at Little Flame's injures, rage filled Lin Dong's eyes. This time, if he had not awakened in time, then Little Flame and Little Martin would have probably been killed by that old dog. "Let's leave now. If that old fellow returns for revenge, it would be another tough battle. Right now, you are still unable to completely deal with him." Little Martin was evidently hurt as well. Therefore, after it spoke quickly, it immediately turned into a light beam and dashed into the stone talisman inside Lin Dong's hand. "Don't worry, the next time I encounter him, I will beat that old dog till he becomes a dead one." Lin Dong viciously gritted his teeth, before he took a moment to readjust himself. Then, while he grabbed onto Little Flame, his feet stepped on a blade shadow before his figure transformed into a rainbow flash and viciously flew towards the opposite direction as Hua Gu. Just as Lin Dong swiftly retreated, that Hua Gu was like an alarmed chicken as he upped his speed to his maximum, and hideously fled towards Great Puppet City. Previously, that close shave with death had evidently terrified him. Therefore, contrary to Lin Dong's expectations, he definitely lacked the guts to turn around and battle them again. As he fled manically, in several hours' time, the Great Puppet City's contour appeared in front of his eyes. Then, he suddenly upped his speed, before he hideously leapt into the city, while his body was dripping with blood. Usually, for a place like Great Puppet City, it was prohibited for anyone to enter via air. Hence, when Hua Gu appeared, it immediately leads to a commotion. However, once they recognized that he was a powerful elite of Ghastly Puppet Cult, all of them turned silent immediately. However, in Great Puppet City, there were several powerful individuals with keen eyesight. Therefore, once they saw Hua Gu, they immediately knew that the latter was severely injured. In the Great Devil Sect, on top of a tower, Mu Qianqun's beautiful eyes stared in bewilderment at that hideous figure in mid-air, before she muttered to herself, "Since that old fellow is at advanced chi creation stage, who could have wounded him so badly?" "Miss, according to our sources, For this trip, Hua Gu seemed to have discovered Lin Dong's location. Standing behind Mu Qian, a man softly spoke. Lin Dong. When she heard these words, Mu Qian was slightly taken aback. In the next instance, awe filled her bewitching and beautiful eyes, before her elegant jade-like hands involuntarily covered her lips. Then, an extremely soft voice, filled with a trace of disbelief, emerged from her lips. Could it be him? How is that possible? Chapter 261, Black-Clothed Teenager. On top of the tower, the atmosphere there had turned slightly quiet. Meanwhile, owing to her own prediction, awe was now plastered across Mu Qianqun's exquisite face. How is that possible? That Lin Dong is only at initial form creation stage. How could he wound Hua Gu to such an extent? After she regained her senses, Mu Qian furrowed her eyebrows while she muttered to herself. Go and investigate this matter. Now that Hua Gu has been wounded so severely, this will definitely cause a commotion in Ghastly Puppet Cult. I want to know who wounded him so severely. Mu Qianqun's beautiful eyes glimmered before she suddenly said crisply. Yes. When he heard her words, the figure standing behind her respectfully answered, before he quickly dashed off. While that figure dashed off, Mu Qianqun's teeth gently bit her red lips. Even though she knew that logically speaking, it was impossible for Lin Dong to wound Hua Gu, who was at advanced Qi creation stage, to such an extent. However, faintly, she felt that her prediction should be correct. Furthermore, if her prediction was correct, then she had evidently vastly underestimated Lin Dong's strength. Advanced Qi creation stage, even in the whole Great Desolate Province, practitioners at this cultivation stage were considered as the elite. In fact, even if she battled against Hua Gu, she doubts that she could wound the latter to such an extent. Among the younger generation members in Great Desolate Province, there was hardly anyone who could accomplish such a feat yet. Evidently, Lin Dong was one of the rarefied ones. Right now, though he has managed to injure Hua Gu, based on the latter's personality, he will not let him go so easily. For their next encounter, he would probably summon all the elite practitioners from Ghastly Puppet Cult to ambush him. At that time, he would be in real danger, Mu Qian muttered to herself with a somewhat regretful expression. No matter how strong an individual was, it was still difficult for one to fight against an entire sect. However, if Lin Dong was truly this talented, then perhaps, she could render him some assistance. After all, the Great Devil Sect and Ghastly Puppet Cult were not on close terms, and it would be beneficial for them if they had an additional powerful enemy. Lin Dong. Right now, I am somewhat interested in you. The day where the Great Wasteland's ancient tablet seal weakens is approaching, and I believe that you would not miss out on this opportunity. I am curious to find out just how impressive you would be on that massive battlefield. Mu Qian smiled coyly. The angle where her lips curled made her seem extremely beautiful and bewitching. However, this time around, that pervert from Ghastly Puppet Cult and the martial arts idiot from Martial Alliance should show up as well. If those two fellows clashed with Lin Dong, I wonder how exciting it would be. As she imagined this sight, a look of anticipation fleeted across Mu Qianqun's eyes. In the large hall of Ghastly Puppet Cult, several elite members stared at that haggard-looking Hua Gu, whose face was so dark that he seemed hideous, while shock gushed into their eyes. They had never expected that based on the latter's strength, he would actually be reduced to such a sorry state. Send my commands, continue to track Lin Dong. I will report this matter to headquarters and instruct them to send out more elite practitioners in order to ambush that little bastard. When they heard Hua Gu's voice, which was extremely cold, everyone's hearts shuddered. A mere initial form creation stage kid, yet they had to alert headquarters. It seems like, it was indeed that kid that reduced Elder Hua to such a sorry state. A few of them stealthily glanced at each other, before they saw the awe filled in their respective eyes. Advanced Qi creation stage. Even in their Ghastly Puppet Cult, such a practitioner was considered as the elite. However, right now, he had actually lost out to a mere 20-year-old kid. The day where the Great Wasteland's ancient tablet seal weakens is approaching. At that time, that kid will surely be there. This time, I will make sure that he has nowhere to hide. Inside the great hall, Hua Gu's facial expression was ghastly, while a thick killing intent and rage filled his venomous words. This time, Lin Dong had caused him to lose his reputation. Hence, he must avenge against him. Just as the whole great puppet city was shocked by Hua Gu's injuries, the man responsible for it, Lin Dong, had already fled away quickly. However, since he had erased the mark within the symbol puppet, he was no longer afraid that Hua Gu could track him down. Therefore, his speed somewhat slowed down. Inside the vast woodlands within the mountain range, Lin Dong was seated on top of a mountain peak, while he stared towards the northwest direction. That was the area where the Great Wasteland's ancient tablet was located. Notwithstanding Great Desolate Province, Great Wasteland's ancient tablet could be considered as one of the most famous landmarks in the entire Great Yan dynasty. Therefore, each time the seal weakens, it would doubtedly create the most massive event in Great Desolate Province. Countless elite practitioners from Great Yan dynasty and even its neighboring dynasties will flock over. The reason is because there are countless treasures inside the Great Wasteland's ancient tablet. Furthermore, the strength of these ancient sects far exceeds the imaginations of most ordinary individuals. Therefore, if one was even able to obtain just a little bit of treasure, perhaps, one could ascend to become a dragon. The treasures within the old tomb, that Lin Dong previously ventured into, could hardly be compared to the treasures within Great Wasteland's ancient tablet. There are 10 more days before the Great Wasteland's ancient tablet seal weakens. Right now, there should be countless people heading towards Great Desolate Ancient Source. Heh, that is a real crowd. A smile hung on Lin Dong's face. That was a real gathering. If one wanted to obtain treasures from Great Wasteland's ancient tablet, unless one was truly powerful, one might not even obtain any leftovers. Oh, the 4 great clans of Great Yan dynasty would likely send out some members as well. Perhaps, I might see some familiar faces. A smile emerged on Lin Dong's face, before it turned into a grin. Though it has only been 1 year, right now, he was no longer that perfect Yuan Dan stage practitioner that could barely withstand Lin Longtian's aura. Right now, Lin Dong had every bit of confidence that even if he could not defeat Lin Langtian, the latter could not force him to stay as well. As he recalled Wang Yan, Lin Dong gently gripped his fist. Right now, Lin Dong was confident that he would utterly defeat that fellow, which had troubled him previously. A battle between heroes. I am curious to find out just how powerful the elite younger generation members of Great Yan dynasty are. Lin Dong's eyes were feverish. Though he came from a humble background, he had managed to obtain all his abilities through perseverance and hard work. Therefore, he no longer feared any genius. Nonetheless, inside Lin Dong's heart, he did not dare to underestimate them. Even when a lion battles with a rabbit, it must utilize its full strength. Else, if it underestimated its foe, it may perhaps let its foe escape, or it may even lose its life. Therefore, after strategizing carefully, Lin Dong flipped his palm, before a dark yellow vest appeared in his hand. That was precisely the high-grade soul treasure that he had obtained from Hua Zong, mysterious earth armor. Lin Dong had personally experienced the defensive properties of this item. Hence, if he was able to repair it, it would prove to be a good insurance policy. For his previous fight against Hua Gu, if he had already repaired this mysterious earth armor, then Lin Dong would not have suffered such injuries after he got pushed back. Though there are many opportunities inside the Great Wasteland's ancient tablet, danger lurks abound as well. Therefore, it is best if one has more means to protect oneself. Hence, I should definitely make use of this mysterious earth armor, else I would be wasting this precious gift. Right now, since Lin Dong was a low-tier soul symbol master, he was unable to refine high-grade soul treasures. However, he was still able to repair them. Once he retrieved his mysterious earth armor, with a flick of his mind, thick mental energy gathered in front of him. Then, with a buzz, they turned into pure mental energy flames. Faintly, a peculiar vibration began to emerge. As he carefully controlled that mental energy flame and placed it on the mysterious earth armor, a loud buzzing noise immediately erupted from the latter. It was not a quick matter to repair the mysterious earth armor. However, Lin Dong understood that slow and steady won the race. Furthermore, now that he had gotten rid of Hua Gu, he had quite a bit of leisure time. Therefore, he took his time as he slowly repaired his mysterious earth armor. As he slowly repaired, 2 days unknowingly passed. For these 2 days, Lin Dong spent all his time on repairing that armor. However, through this experience, Lin Dong had gained several benefits. Not only did he increase his mastery over mental energy fire, he had also managed to completely repair his mysterious earth armor. On top of the mountain peak, Lin Dong stared at his mysterious earth armor, that was encircled by peculiar glowing halos, before a satisfied smile emerged on his face. After dreaming about it for so long, he finally possessed a defensive-style soul treasure. Even though he snatched it from someone else. Everything is ready. Lin Dong heartily laughed, before he immediately wore that mysterious earth armor. Instantly, he could feel a glowing film emerge from within the mysterious earth armor, before it surrounded his entire body. Though that glowing film seemed flimsy, it possessed the ability to block most form creation stage practitioners' attacks. After he repaired that mysterious earth armor, Lin Dong stood up before he stared at his northwest direction. Right now, it was time for him to head to Great Desolate Ancient Source. Currently, that area should be extremely crowded. Little Flame. Lin Dong waved his hand, before a tiger roar echoed out inside the woodlands. Then, lightning sparks flashed, before Little Flame dashed forth. Once he saw Little Flame emerge, Lin Dong was just about to ride it, before his pupils suddenly shrunk. Then, he violently turned his head, before he turned to look towards his south. At that area, there was a violent splitting wind sound. Immediately, Lin Dong saw a black-clothed teenager who was hovering on a giant eagle. There was an extremely solid black steel bar on his shoulders, while a maniacal fighting intent faintly emerged from his body. Such a potent fighting intent, such a powerful aura. As he stared at that black-clothed teenager, who was hovering on a giant eagle with a metal bar on his shoulders, awe flashed across Lin Dong's eyes. He had never expected that there would be such a capable individual among the younger generation members of Great Desolate Province. As Lin Dong stared at that figure, the latter also detected his gaze, as his eyes immediately shifted. Promptly, awe flashed across that black-clothed youth's face, before he gasped and slowed down. Chapter 262, Great Desolate Ancient Origin. The youth in black stood atop a giant eagle. When he was about 100 meters away from Lin Dong, that youth slowly stopped and slightly tilted his head, while his eyes slowly swept across Lin Dong's body, before thick shock filled his eyes. He was able to sense that Lin Dong's aura was at advanced form creation stage. Perhaps, this cultivation level was nothing much to him. However, though he could not put a finger on it, based on his extremely abundant battle experience, he could sense a hint of danger emerging from the latter. Ha, I never expected that I would actually meet an opponent that can make me feel endangered. The youth in black carried a black metal rod on his shoulder, as he grinned at Lin Dong and said, "Friend, I am known as Wu Ci, would you have a bout with me?" Upon hearing the black-clothed youth's slightly silly tone, the corners of Lin Dong's eyes could not help but twitch. When he first saw the former, he knew that this was a person who was addicted to fighting, yet he did not expect that after exchanging a few words, the former would immediately ask for a fight. Not interested. Lin Dong shook his head. He could tell from Wu Ci's aura that he should be at the initial qi creation stage. Being able to reach this stage at such an age very clearly indicated that the latter should be rather famous in the Great Desolate Province. However, Lin Dong was not too knowledgeable about these matters, and hence was unable to guess the other party's identity. After speaking, Lin Dong was lazy to linger any further. He leapt onto the tiger's back, intending to leave immediately. "You should be the one that injured old man Hua Gu of the ghastly puppet cult, Lin Dong, right?" Just as Lin Dong was about to leave, the black-clothed youth suddenly tilted his head a little, looking at Lin Dong as he smiled. Upon hearing these words, Lin Dong's expression could not help but slightly darken. He turned his head, his gaze somewhat icy as he watched Wu Xi and replied, "Are you sent by the ghastly puppet cult?" "Haha, those guys who carry dead people with them are unable to hire me." Wu Xi heartily laughed. From his tone, he had no fear of the ghastly puppet cult. Lin Dong's expression slightly relaxed, but he did not plan to chat any further. Gently patting Little Flame, the latter let out a low roar, before its lightning wings fluttered. "Hey friend, since you and the ghastly puppet cult do not have a good relationship, let me give you some advice. It is said for the sake of catching you, ghastly puppet cult have deployed quite a number of powerful practitioners. Besides, you should be wary of a particular pervert from ghastly puppet cult. It is reputed that is on the hunt as well, and he seems quite interested in you." Haha. Just as Lin Dong was about to depart, that Wu Xi suddenly laughed as he said. Lin Dong's expression turned somewhat solemn, before he nodded his head. He had already anticipated that the ghastly puppet cult would deploy several elite practitioners to the Great Desolate Ancient Tablet in order to ambush him. However, this would not deter him from entering the Great Desolate Ancient Tablet. "Thanks." Lin Dong looked at Wu Xi, before he cupped his hands. Then, Little Flame's lightning wings fluttered, before it transformed into a lightning spark amidst a thunder roar, and dashed across the horizons. "Ha, that kid will make a pretty good opponent. If I have the opportunity, I would definitely love to have a good fight with him. However, it seems like that pervert from ghastly puppet cult is on the hunt as well. I wonder if this Lin Dong will be able to survive." As he stared at Lin Dong's departing figure, Wu Xi involuntarily scratched his chin while he muttered to himself. "Haha, however this kid is truly courageous." Despite knowing that there are several elite ghastly puppet cult practitioners at the Great Ancient Wastelands Tablet, he still dares to venture forth. "Haha, I must hurry there as well, else I may miss out on a good show." After he spoke, Wu Xi released a hearty laugh, before the giant eagle beneath his feet released a loud cry, and fluttered its giant eagle wings. Then, it hastily dashed off. Great Wasteland's ancient tablet was the most ancient existence in the entire Great Desolate Province. With regards to this relic left behind by an ancient sect, most people regard it almost akin to a legend. After all, most of them were unable to imagine just how powerful that ancient sect was. Though the Great Wasteland's ancient tablet had existed for countless of years, no one was able to break its seal. Even a Nirvana stage practitioner was powerless against that formidable seal. That was ultimately the reason why that Great Wasteland's ancient tablet could continue to remain in Great Desolate Province. It was because no one could break that seal. Furthermore, due to the existence of Great Wasteland's ancient tablet, the Great Desolate Ancient Source was undoubtedly Great Desolate Province and even Great Yan Dynasty most famous landmark. Each time the Great Wasteland Ancient Tablet seal weakens, it will draw countless elite practitioners from all over the world. This was a real gathering of heroes. With regards to the repute of Great Desolate Ancient Source, when Lin Dong barely arrived at its borders and stared at the countless figures swarming through that vast plains, just like an army of ants, he finally realized just terrifying the allure of Great Wasteland's ancient tablet was. In the air above, from time to time, figures would flash by. These people were riding on various flying mounts and soul treasures. As they passed by, rainbow flashes would emerge across the horizons, before it sliced the allure blue sky into tiny beautiful pieces. It is truly crowded. As he stared at this terrifying crowd, Lin Dong involuntarily gulped. Then, he proceeded to look ahead as he turned to look at the inner regions of Great Desolate Ancient Source. At that area, he could faintly sense an extremely obscure yet terrifying aura, that could not be described by words. Under that peculiar aura, even an powerful existence such as the ancient dragon ape, pales in comparison. Evidently, that was the spot where the Great Wasteland's ancient tablet was located. It is indeed a relic left by an ancient sect. Even after so many years, its aura is still so domineering. As he sensed that aura, Lin Dong's face turned exceedingly solemn. That ancient sect is pretty decent. They can actually give off such an aura. Little Martin's words emerged at this moment. Lin Dong could detect a hint of shock contained within its words. That aura has the ability to seal off the skies. Therefore, one is unable to fly once one enters the deeper regions of Great Desolate Ancient Source. However, this will not affect us. After all, I am able to conceal us from that aura. Oh! When he heard those words, Lin Dong was somewhat taken aback. When he sensed that aura, he had experienced a pressure that was attempting to push him towards the ground. Though this pressure seemed faint, even after he utilized all of his Yuan power, he was unable to resist it. However, he had never expected that little Martin was able to evade against it. If that was the case, he had another means to protect himself. Right now, he was in a tough spot. If the ghastly puppet cult members discovered him, he would probably be in for another tough fight. Therefore, if little Martin was able to counter against that pressure, then, even if he could not defeat him, he could safely retreat. Haha, the heavens are truly in our favor. Lin Dong gently smiled, before he patted little Flame. Then, the latter flapped its lightning wings, before they dashed towards the inner region of Great Desolate Ancient Source. However, even though little Martin was able to help them evade the no-flying restriction, Lin Dong did not brazenly fly in. Instead, when he saw that the figures in the skies were decreasing, he began to urge little Flame to descend as well, in order to prevent themselves from drawing the attention of ghastly puppet cult members. After they descended, little Flame transformed into a cat, before it jumped into Lin Dong's arms. Then, Lin Dong directly mixed into that vast crowd and followed them as they headed for the deeper regions of Great Desolate Ancient Source. Along the way, Lin Dong spotted a few ghastly puppet cult members. However, that old fart Huagu had evidently underestimated the crowd that were drawn by the Great Wasteland's ancient tablet. Therefore, as they faced that overwhelming crowd, those ghastly puppet cult members were fairly frustrated. After all, the ones who dared to venture here were mostly skilled individuals. Therefore, several of them had quite a bad attitude. Even though the ghastly puppet cult was quite reputable, they were unable to handle the crowd's rage. Hence, in the end, they could only stealthily remove some of the barricades that they had set up. When Lin Dong, who had mixed into the crowd, saw this sight, he stealthily chuckled. It seems like that Huagu is truly persistent. There was still a few days before that Great Wasteland's ancient tablet seal weakens. Hence, Lin Dong was in no hurry. During evening time, he finally reached the deeper regions of Great Desolate Ancient Source. When Lin Dong arrived, the vast plains were already filled with swarms of people. Located at the tip of the crowd, were several elite factions from Great Desolate Province and Great Yan Dynasty. They had taken the best spots in the area, while they maintained a friendly border divide between them. However, evidently, not every major faction had arrived. Even up till now, there were still several of them traveling towards this area at full speed. Lin Dong's eyes swept across his surroundings, before his eyes stopped at a distant spot. A look of awe slowly emerged in his eyes, before they spread across his face. A nearly 1,000-meter-long ancient stone tablet was reflected in Lin Dong's pupils, as it silently stood at the deepest region of that vast plain. An boundless and vicissitude ancient aura emerged from it, allowing one to feel just how powerful that ancient sect was. There were a few ancient and large symbols carved onto that ancient tablet, that were faintly discernible. A terrifying vibration, that seemed powerful enough to rip apart the heavens emerged from them. That vibration caused to understand just how tiny one was. That ancient tablet stood right in the vast plains and it looked just like the stairways to heavens. It was harsh yet majestic, ancient yet vicissitude. Is that the Great Desolate Ancient Tablet? As he stared at that magnificent awe-inspiring ancient stone tablet, Lin Dong involuntarily sucked in a deep breath, while awe overwhelmed his eyes. After all, this was the first time he had witnessed such a magnificent sight. Just as Lin Dong was in awe over that Great Wasteland's ancient tablet, suddenly, there was a commotion at a distance away. Then, the surrounding air was slowly torn apart, before figures slowly emerged. Meanwhile, Lin Dong could detect a familiar icy cold mental energy vibrations emerging from their bodies. Ghastly puppet cult. When he detected these vibrations, Lin Dong's eyes glimmered. Those fellows have finally arrived. Under Lin Dong's glare, those ghastly puppet cult members directly walked through the crowds. However, he did not see Hua Gu's figure. Just as he was troubled by this fact, his eyes suddenly stopped at the central area of the ghastly puppet cult members. At that spot, there was a man, with a cold and bony face, dressed in blood-red clothes. Such a savage mental energy. When Lin Dong saw that man dressed in blood-red clothes, his heart shuddered immediately. That was because he could detect that the latter's mental energy was extremely dangerous and savage. That person must be the so-called ghastly puppet cult pervert that Wu Xi mentioned. Lin Dong's eyes were slightly downtrodden. It seems like there were several powerful practitioners in ghastly puppet cult. Right now, though this man ahead of him did not have an aura as powerful as Hua Gu, he gave off a dangerous scent that was just as potent as Hua Gu's.